out there. I think because of the way that college athletics works and the departments work is there are a couple sports that make money regularly. Now, individual sports that are considered non-revenues at different programs can make money or break even. I'll throw out LSU baseball. Probably that's very well compared to most other baseball programs because if you go to the box there, it is pretty much sold out all the time. The atmosphere is great. It's part of the tradition. It's ingrained in the culture. But even then, they probably don't make as much money as you would think they would make. But they're probably getting closer to breaking even than most non-revenue sports do. But the revenue sports are men's basketball and football. And obviously football is driving all this. I think we are heading to a place because if you look at sports like wrestling or, say, lacrosse or things like that, you might find, if you looked at the conference, Big East lacrosse might include some teams that you've never would have thought would be in Big East lacrosse because they have a lacrosse team. They're not in a conference that has lacrosse. The Big 12 wrestling has teams in it that, are different in all the way. I think that's probably where it's eventually going to go. And if you're talking about adding, say, UConn and Gonzaga to men's and women's basketball only, I think that that's fine. I think that's where it's headed. And I think that's where things need to focus on is, make the money where you can make the money, make the growth where you can make the growth, and then make the other ones make sense and be competitive, and then be regional. That way you're not sending volleyball across the country to play 2 games and then come back.
So you like big sports a la carte, basically?
I think I don't know if I like ultimately, I know coming from a program you want to play your rivals and everything, right? But I do think that the powers that be on the money sports are telling us that that's not really going to happen anymore. So you probably need to get ready for the idea that, you might get to play, baseball, softball, track, tennis, all that might all play the same teams in the Big 12, right? That might be the same.
Yeah, you're not going to – there's no way that you could split it up and fracture it to where, this pocket of programs is playing in this league and this pocket's playing in this league because ultimately, how are you going to have Big 12 meetings if you have, 12 sports spread across, 3 conferences? That would be really a lot to keep up with and a lot to try and wrangle. I think to simplify what you're trying to say and tell me if I'm wrong is basically football and basketball need to break off and become semi-pro sports like they sort of already are, and they're people kind of think the road they're going down anyways.
Yeah, and then leave everything else regional because there's going to be a time, especially when you talk about employment and all these things that are happening, in order to protect them, you're going to have to do something different. Because otherwise, if you give people who are bottom liners, and that's what this will come, a chance to get to the bottom line, okay, what do we have to do to be Title IX compliant? You have to have as many opportunities for women athletes as you do for men. Then they'll count that exact number, and then they'll get rid of everything else, and then they'll get rid of the men's sports that counterbalance it too. And then you're compliant. So as a way to protect the way that everybody knows, I think that the smaller sports, the non-revenue sports, are going to have to be much more regional and not along for the ride because football has decided to be, nationwide.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how it goes for UCLA soccer and USC baseball, and those programs are going to be trudging a bit of a longer ways during the week than they normally would be. That'll be an interesting experiment there in year number 1, and how they manage with that. Now the money will help, having those private flights and things that they might not otherwise have to give them that comfort level and not make it as much of a an exhausting trip as it may seem on paper. When you're doing it every other week or so, that's going to be, really interesting to see if that has the effect that some think that it could have, just, financially to some extent, but mostly just exhaustion levels and the amount of travel that you're going to have to do in comparison to what you normally would do. But, it definitely feels like there's something that's going to have to change. Because there are programs that are operating off of the college athletics model, and then there are clearly a couple of sports or a couple of leagues and a couple of sports that are taking this thing in another direction at 100 miles per hour, it feels like. And I don't really blame the leagues, just that that's where a lot of the money is, and that's where a lot of the safety and security is. And so it's easy for the Big Ten and the SEC to talk about they should be employees. Well, guess who's going to be making the money to be able to pay those guys and gals? Those schools, and the others, all the rest of the country, the ones that are going, well, if suddenly we have to pay football players like this and basketball players like this, like regular average employee, I mean, you talk about like COVID and what it did to programs, and I know that people probably don't blink twice if, Mercer lost their wrestling program or something, and I don't even know if Mercer has a wrestling. I'm just throwing the most random thing I could in my head as an example, but there will be some side effects and some collateral damage, no doubt about it, and it's a problem that is, very much on the horizon. It seems like it's drawing closer each day, but I guess, that would be one way to do it, is to split them off. I mean, there's been talks about that. I don't know what that would look like or what that would even, like how that would even, work. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be harder here in a few years to justify, a football player being the same level, and they're not right now, but yeah, if you're going to have to pay football players as if they're actual employees and full meal deal and all of that. I mean, how many are going to want to do that with tennis and golf and lacrosse and soccer and swimming and diving and, all these other things? There's just simply not going to be the ability to do that or the want to do that. And, that's going to create potentially a whole lot of collateral damage. But we're not quite there yet. But it's good that people are at least, aware of it and having these conversations to try and figure out how best we can stem that. But, I don't know what the solution is, and I don't know that anybody really knows what the solution is other than what you said at the beginning, which is breaking those off into their own deals where they're basically minor leagues. But there's a lot of people that don't like that idea either.
I don't want to – I know. But I think you have to – the cold hard reality of the situation is that if you want to protect the rest of college athletics, you have to get real about where the big money sports are going. And to say that, men's basketball recruiting and all that is the same as what's going on with men's tennis, it's not. Now, the tennis would love for it to be. I mean, they would love for it to be. But the reality is that that's not how it works, is that there's not, people breaking down their door to do that. Where NIL comes in for those sports is that you can make money on social media or whatever you can work. Look, gymnastics is not a big deal. Nobody's turning on college gymnastics and breaking television ratings, but Livy Dunn is big because of her social media presence. That's what the non-revenue sports benefit from NIL. But when it comes to, the big-time NIL that's coming into football and basketball, and now women's basketball a little bit, you see what's going on with the LSU team from this past year, then I think you need to look at realistically as these are different than what you have. And it's been different for a long time, and the attempt to cling on to what was is not realistically dealing with what is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's already obvious. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's clear that this is not what it once was and is not going to ever be that again. I think we can all agree on that point of it. As far as what it looks like, here in the future, I think that's, clearly the conversation we're having and, what a lot of people are wondering about, including the people in charge making the decisions. But they're also not fully in charge, as we've seen. There's, some pleading for help from the federal government to try and, help make some of these decisions for them or create, some barriers or whatnot to try and make the picture a little bit clearer for all involved. But I mean, it's heading down a path, but we're about to hit that tunnel and it gets dark, and I don't know what's on the other side of that thing. That's all I know. That's what it feels like to me, is that you see that tunnel coming, it's going to get dark for a second, but what's on the other end of that? No idea. And so, I think that's what, again, a lot of people are trying to figure out at the moment. And, as a college athletics fan and just a sports fan, I love the setup, but I also absolutely understand the need for compensation, NIL, and on that